Hello and welcome back to another video tutorial. My name is Joseph. Today I will be walking you through a quick way to manually parameterize API tests using injected JSON data with Postman Collection Runner. And in case you want to follow along, I encourage you to visit my GitHub. Today we'll be using the Java Spring React project. So let's get started. The first thing that we'll want to do is start up our Spring Boot application. Once that's loaded, we'll hop over to the employee controller where I've already created some get mappings. As you can see here, we have one for employee that will return all the employees. And then we also have another get mapping that includes an ID, which will return a specific employee for the ID given. The next thing we'll want to do is go over to Postman where we can create a collection of some GET requests that will mimic these specific GET mappings. As you can see in my Postman, I've already created a collection called Spring Boot that includes two GET requests. The first one is an endpoint for all employees, and if we run it, you'll see it returns an array of every employee in the database. The second request is for a specific ID. So if we run this one, you'll see ID number 3 belongs to Joseph. The fun part about these sorts of requests is the fact that you can write tests inside of each request that you're running. As you can see here, I've already written a test for this specific get mapping. For more information, you guys should definitely check out learningpostman.com. There's a lot of documentation there that'll teach you how to write these JavaScript-based tests. Let's run through this real quick. So PM stands for Postman. It's just kind of a global variable that you can use to get the response in a certain format. So we get the response here as JSON. For the first test, we expect a status code of 200. And so we write pm.response.to.have.status 200. The second test here, you can see that I expect ID to be 3, the name to be my name, the department to be IT. So if we run this, you can see down here at the test results will give you 2 passing points. Now that we've created our collection, the next thing we'll want to do is click the button on the top left called Runner. This opens up the Collection Runner. The first thing we'll want to do is choose a collection. Since we've already created our Spring Boot collection, we can open it up and see that our GET mappings are already available for us. For this specific test, we're going to want to keep the second mapping, but uncheck the first mapping. The reason being is we're going to inject data into the ID to return specific employees. On the left-hand menu, you'll see there are 4 options. We can ignore the first 3 options for now, but for data, we're going to select a certain file, which you can find back in the project. Here I have the employees.json file that includes an array of employees already built out for you. After we choose the employees.json file, you'll see the iterations change to 4 since there are 4 objects inside of the array. We can preview the data by clicking the preview button. Notice how there's 4 iterations already built out for us. Finally, we can click Run Spring Boot. So, as you can see, 8 tests passed, and if we hover over the first iteration here and click on it, we can see that the request URL was employee-3, which is what we provided in our get mapping. However, on every single iteration, we're providing employee-3. So we're going to want to change that in order to reflect the data that we're providing in our employees.json file. So if we head back over to Postman, the first thing we can do in order to inject the data that we know is change the URL to grab the ID from our iterations. The last and final step that we'll need to do is change our expectations to grab the iteration data. And I'll fast forward through this part for simplicity's sake. And voila! Now we're grabbing the iteration data exactly from what we expect in our array. However, when we run this from our test scripts, we'll see a failure because the iteration data isn't actually running from the collection runner. So let's go back to the collection runner and run Spring Boot once more. As you can see, all the iterations have completed successfully, and the IDs that are being generated are from the data that we expect. In conclusion, I'd like to say that this is a great way to run parameterized tests against your API using injected data that we expect to be valid. Now, depending on your workplace needs, This sort of logic can be transferred over to an object-oriented programming language such as Java, like I used in my project. I also used TestNG's data provider to grab the employee's JSON file and run through multiple test iterations, as you can see here. It will take time to set up this portion of generic code, but it pays off in the long run with continuous integration. So that concludes the tutorial. Thanks for watching and have a great day.